They say that to drink from the Omi-Ofe is to live forever, but they never tell you what kind of life you will lead. In our last chapter, we saw young Amadi defy the elders of Umu-Oda. He watched his mother wither away from a sickness no medicine could touch, and in his desperation, he committed the ultimate sin. He stole the sacred clay pot and trekked into the heart of the forbidden jungle. He reached the glowing turquoise waters. He saw the woman in white, and he brought the miracle back to his village. But a stolen miracle is a silent curse. As his mother drank, her body healed, but the village began to die. A supernatural frost has turned the palm trees to glass and the people into frozen statues. Amadi has realized too late that the river did not give him a gift. It gave him a debt. Now he must return to the water, not as a thief, but as a prisoner. He must dive deeper than any man has ever gone to find the source of the curse. And the only way to break the ice is with a heart that is willing to break first. This is the final reckoning. The trek back to Umu-Oda was not a journey of miles, but a journey of every sin I'd ever committed. Every step I took, the sun seemed to mock my thirst. My skin was now so brittle it felt like sun-dried parchment, and my eyes were clouded with the dust of the wilderness. But as I crested the final hill overlooking my home, the heat of the sun was suddenly replaced by a chill that made my very blood stutter. The village did not look like the home I'd left. A thick, eerie mist, the same turquoise color as the Omi-Ofe, had swallowed the huts. The great Iroko trees, which had stood for centuries, were now encased in a shell of shimmering ice. The people, my neighbors, the children, even the village dogs, stood perfectly still. They weren't dead. They were frozen in time, their faces contorted in the middle of screams or laughter, trapped in a blue-glass prison. I staggered into the village square. There, in the center, sat my mother. She was on her knees, her hands clasped in prayer, a single tear frozen like a diamond on her cheek. "Mother!" I tried to scream, but only a cloud of gray ash escaped my throat. Then the water began to rise. Not from the river banks, but from the ground itself. The earth was weeping the turquoise water of the Forbidden River. It pooled around my ankles, but unlike the others, it didn't freeze me. It burned. It was a cold fire that demanded an answer. The spirit's final demand. From the center of the mist, the woman in white emerged again. Her presence was heavier now, pressing down on the village like a falling mountain. "Amadi," she whispered, her voice echoing from the frozen walls of the huts. "You returned. You found that the desert has no water and the world has no mercy for a thief. But look at what your healing has done. To save your mother, you opened a door that cannot be shut. The river has come to claim its vessel. It does not want a pot anymore. It wants a soul." She pointed her long, ebony finger at my mother. The water that healed her was alone, and the interest is the entire village, unless the thief returns what he stole, with interest. I looked at the frozen world around me. I saw the greed of my youth, the pride of my wrestling days, and the 3 years of ash in my mouth. I realized the final spiritual lesson. True redemption is not found in surviving the curse, but in becoming the sacrifice that breaks it. "Take me," I wheezed, the words finally forming through the dust. "I am the vessel. Let the water return to its bed. Let them breathe." The woman in white smiled, a terrifying sight that looked like a crack in a midnight sky. "Then step into the mirror, Amadi. But know this. Once you enter the Omi-Ofe as its prisoner, the world will forget you ever existed. Your mother will live, but she will never know she had a son." This was the ultimate thirst, the thirst for a legacy, for a name. To be forgotten is to die twice. I looked at my mother one last time. I whispered a prayer, not for my life, but for her memory to be full of peace. I stepped into the center of the rising pool. The waters surged upward, wrapping around me like 1,000 cold serpents. As the water covered my eyes, I saw the ice on my mother's face begin to crack. But as she opened her eyes and looked directly at me, she didn't see her son. She saw a monster of the river, and her face filled with a horror that was worse than death. To the world above, I had vanished into a ripple. But as I sank into the depths of the Omi-Ofe, the water did not feel like a liquid. It felt like a heavy, cold memory. I was not drowning in the way a man drowns in a common stream. I was falling through layers of history. I descended past the roots of the world where the sun's light became a distant, pulsing blue star. Here, the silence was absolute, a silence that weighed 1,000 pounds. I landed on a bed of white sand that glowed with a faint, ghostly luminescence. The gallery of the Disobedient. I looked around, and my breath, if you could call the silver mist leaving my chest breath, hit me with the force of a hammer. I was not alone. Scattered across the floor of the river were others. They were like statues carved from salt. There was a man clutching a handful of gold that had turned into black stones. There was a woman holding a child made of coral, her face frozen in a scream of eternal regret. These were the ones who, like me, had tried to take from the divine without paying the price of character. "Welcome, Amadi," a voice boomed, though no one stood there. It was the voice of the river itself. The Omi-Ofe was not just a place, but a mind. You are the first in 100 years to walk in willingly, but your willingness does not erase your debt. You thought you could heal your mother with a stolen miracle. Now you shall see what happens to miracles when they are unearned. The mirror of truth. In front of me, a wall of water hardened until it became as smooth as a king's mirror. In it, I didn't see my reflection. I saw my village. I saw my mother. She was healthy, yes. She was walking through the marketplace, her skin glowing with the vitality of the water I had brought her. But as she passed the friends I had wrestled with, as she walked past the hut where I had grown up, she looked lost. She felt a hole in her heart, a shape in her life that was missing, but she could not name it. The spirit was right. To save her life, I had erased my existence from her heart. It was a torture, worse than the thirst of the desert. To see the woman who birthed me look at my old wrestling trophy and wonder why it was in her house. To see her touch my favorite tunic and use it to wipe dust from a table because it meant nothing to her. It tore my soul into 1,000 jagged pieces. "Is this the life you bought for her?" the river mocked. "A life of health, but without the love of the son who saved her. Your sacrifice is a hollow shell, Amadi. You are still trying to be the hero, but you are only a ghost." The spiritual lesson. Sacrifice without love is empty. I realized then the depth of my failure. I had gone to the river out of pride, to prove the elders wrong. I had returned out of fear, to stop my own suffering. Even my sacrifice was a way to end my pain. I had never truly loved my mother more than my own reputation. I fell to my knees on that cold underwater sand. I didn't ask for my life back. I didn't ask for the thirst to end. "Let her remember," I whispered. "Even if she hates me for what I did, let her have her son back in her mind. Take my soul, grind it into the sand of this riverbed. Use my essence to fuel the light of the village for 1,000 years. But do not let her live a life where love has no name." For the first time, the woman in white appeared before me in the depths. She was no longer terrifying. She looked tired, ancient, and strangely sad. She held out a hand, and in it was the clay pot I had used that first night. It was cracked, but it held a single glowing drop of clear water. "A heart that finally breaks for another is the only thing that can quench the thirst of the Omi-Ofe," she said. She tipped the pot, and as the drop of water hit the sand, the entire river began to boil. The white statues of the other prisoners began to move, their salt crusts breaking away. But as the floor of the river opened up to swallow me, I felt a hand, a human hand, warm and calloused, reached down through the miles of water to grab my hair. The hand that gripped me was not the hand of a spirit, nor was it the cold touch of the woman in white. It was a hand scarred by the thorns of the farm and the heat of the cooking fire. It was the hand of a mother who refuses to let the grave claim what she has already birthed. Through the boiling turquoise depths, I was dragged upward. The pressure in my oars felt like the weight of 1,000 mountains, and the light above grew blinding, shifting from the ghostly blue of the river to the golden, holy fire of the afternoon sun. The return to the surface. I broke the surface of the Omi-Ofe with a gasp that tore through my chest. For the first time in 3 years, the air did not feel like needles. I rolled onto the muddy bank, retching and coughing, but I did not cough up grey ash. I coughed up clear, sweet water. I looked up, squinting against the light. My mother stood over me, her white hair blowing in the wind, her eyes streaming with tears. The ice that had frozen the village was gone. The turquoise mist had retreated into the reeds. The village was breathing again. "Amadi?" she whispered. I waited for the void. I waited for her to ask who I was, as the spirit had promised. But she reached down and pulled my skeletal frame into her arms. "My son," she sobbed. "I felt you slipping into the dark. I felt the name I gave you being erased from the book of life, but I told the Almighty, He who provided the ram for Abraham, that if He took my life to pay your debt, I would give it gladly. I told Him that a mother's love is the only thing that can swim deeper than a curse." I sat on the bank of that river for a long time, watching the water. It was just water now, clear, cool, and silent. The woman in white was gone, but her lesson remained etched into the marrow of my bones. I realized then what life taught me. Disobedience is not just a mistake, it is a theft. When we break the laws of the Spirit, we are stealing peace from our future and joy from those who love us. I thought I was being a hero by fetching that water, but I was really just a coward who couldn't handle the sight of suffering. I tried to fix a spiritual problem with a physical sin, and it nearly cost the world everything. The transformation. I returned to Umu-Oda, but I was not the same Amadi. The arrogant wrestler had died in the river. In his place was a man who walked with a limp, a reminder that grace always leaves a mark. I became the guardian of the Omi-Ofe. I spent the rest of my days sitting by its banks, telling the children the stories of the elders. I taught them that the forbidden is not a cage to keep them in, but a shield to keep the darkness out. And every time I take a drink of water, every time that cool, life-giving liquid slides down my throat, I close my eyes and offer a prayer. Because I know that for every drop I drink, a price was paid. I know that I am a man who was allowed to come back from the land of ash to tell you this. Do not let your pride build a bridge that your soul cannot cross. For the water you steal today will become the thirst that consumes you tomorrow. But if you find yourself in the desert or at the bottom of a forbidden river, remember, confession is the only thing that turns ash back into water. My name is Amadi. I am the man who drank from the forbidden river and lived to tell the tale, and if there is one thing life has taught me, it is this. God's mercy is deeper than any river, but His laws are the only banks that keep us from drowning.